The circle of definitions. Picture yourself holding a dictionary, a heavy, leather-bound one, its pages whispering as you flip them. You decide to look up the word time. The entry reads, the duration between events. That seems reasonable, but your curiosity pushes you further. What exactly does duration mean? You trace your finger across the page until you find it, the measure of time. And just like that, you're back where you started. It feels like a trick. You set out to uncover a definition, but instead you found a circle. Time is defined by duration, and duration is defined by time. You haven't reached bedrock. You've only looped endlessly from one word to another, like being caught in a roundabout with no exit. At first, it seems harmless. Dictionaries are practical tools, not cosmic revelations. But if you follow this thread far enough, something unsettling appears. Every word relies on other words to make sense. Light might be explained as brightness, while brightness is described as the quality of being lit. Language folds back into itself like a snake eating its own tail. No matter how deep you dig, you never strike a solid foundation. Imagine standing in a hall of mirrors. Every direction you turn, you see endless reflections, each one pointing to another, but none of them shows an original object. There's no first image outside the glass, just copies of copies, arranged in infinite regression. That's what language looks like when you peel back the layers. It's not a window to the world. It's a system of symbols pointing only to more symbols. This raises a haunting question. If words only define other words, do we ever truly know what anything means? Or are we trapped inside a symbolic spiral, mistaking reflections for reality? The trap of self-reference. Philosophers call this the problem of circular definitions. It appears whenever you try to pin down meaning by using tools that are themselves caught in the same system. It's like asking a liar whether they're lying or trying to lift yourself off the ground by pulling your shoelaces. The system falls back on itself, providing no escape. Take mathematics. We often imagine numbers as crisp, objective, untouchable truths. Yet even mathematics is built on definitions that, in a sense, rely on one another. What is one? You might say, the first natural number. But what is a number? Something like an element used to measure quantity. And what is quantity? A measurable amount. And what is an amount? Sooner or later, your chain of definitions starts to loop. Math feels solid not because it escapes the circle, but because we agreed to stop asking questions at some point. This mirrors what happens in language. We accept definitions as good enough, but if pressed, they dissolve into spirals. Wittgenstein's warning. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein wrestled with this problem in the early 20th century. He realized that language is not a clear window onto reality. It's more like a game with agreed-upon rules. Words don't point to some ultimate essence. They point to other words, gestures, and shared practices. For example, the word game. What's the definition? You might say, an activity involving rules and competition that works for chess, but not for tag. Or you could say, an activity for fun that works for hide and seek, but not for professional sports. Wittgenstein concluded that some concepts, like game, have no ultimate definition. Instead, they form a network of family resemblances, like overlapping circles in a Venn diagram. But notice what happens here. Instead of escaping the loop, we simply map the loop differently. Words point to other words, which point to practices, which then loop back to words. We don't step outside the system. We only learn to navigate its spirals with more grace. The dream of grounding language. Many thinkers tried to escape the circle by searching for an ultimate foundation. Philosophers like John Locke hoped that words could be anchored to simple ideas derived from raw experience. The word red, for instance, could be tied directly to the sensation of seeing red. That way, not every word would need to chase another definition. But this dream stumbles quickly. What does red really mean? To a painter, it's a pigment. To a physicist, it's a wavelength of light around 700 nanometers. To a poet, it's passion, blood, or love. To a child, it's just a crayon in a box. And even if you point to the color itself, how do you know the person next to you sees the same shade? Maybe their red is your green. Words don't transmit raw sensation. They only coordinate shared labels within a community. So once again, we are in the hall of mirrors. Our attempt to ground language in something outside of itself, pure sensation, still loops back into interpretation, agreement, and description. The infinite dictionary. Imagine if you had to define every single word in a dictionary without leaving any gaps. No synonyms, no circular shortcuts. Each definition would need to be perfectly self-contained. Could it even be done? In theory, you'd need to create a massive hierarchy, starting from some irreducible foundation. But in practice, language doesn't work that way. Every dictionary is an infinite dictionary where entries chase one another in loops. To look up one word is always to risk spiraling into another, and then another, without end. Linguists point out that language works not because it escapes the circle, but because it functions within it. Words mean what they do because of the relationships they have with other words in the system. Like pieces in a chess game, their role isn't absolute, it's relative to the rules and to each other. But this reliance on relation, rather than foundation, is exactly what makes the circle so haunting. It means there is no final ground beneath our knowledge. Everything floats in a web of signs, suspended in midair. Derrida and the endless play of signs. The French philosopher Jacques Derrida pushed this idea even further. He argued that meaning is always deferred, never fully present. He coined the term difference, a play on the French word for both difference and deferral. Think of it like this. If you ask, what is justice? Someone might say, fairness. But then you ask, what is fairness? And they reply, equality. Then you ask, what is equality? And the chain continues. Each step defers meaning to another word, which itself needs explaining. You never arrive at a final, solid truth. Meaning is always postponed, always hovering just out of reach. Like chasing the horizon, the closer you get, the more it recedes. Everyday circles. This might sound abstract, but circular definitions creep into daily life all the time. Ask someone what healthy food means, and they might say, food that's good for you. Then ask what good for you means, and you'll likely hear, something that makes you healthy. Ask what successful means, and the answer might be achieving goals. Ask what goals are, and the answer might be things that make you successful. The words don't reveal truths. They orbit one another in loops that only feel meaningful because we stop the questioning early. The psychological loop. There's also a psychological dimension here. Humans crave certainty. We want words to nail things down, to point directly to the real. But when definitions fold into one another, they reveal just how fragile our understanding is. This can produce unease. It's like realizing that the floor beneath you is only supported by more floorboards, which are themselves suspended in midair. There is no bedrock, only layers of mutual support floating together. Yet strangely, it works. We build science, philosophy, and daily life atop these floating platforms of language. The system may be circular, but it's functional. Like a bicycle while spinning endlessly, its very motion keeps it upright. Escaping the loop? Can we escape this circle of definitions? Some argue that images, experiences, or direct sensations might free us. You don't need a word for pain to feel it. The raw sting is undeniable. Similarly, you don't need the word blue to perceive the sky. But the moment you try to communicate that experience, you're back inside the circle. To tell someone you're in pain, you need the word pain. To describe the sky, you need blue. Language always pulls us back in, binding our private sensations into its endless loops. The deeper question, and so we're left with a disturbing possibility. Maybe there is no escape. Maybe all knowledge, all reasoning, all communication is built not on solid ground, but on circles of symbols referring only to each other. Does this make meaning an illusion? Or does it suggest that meaning is not about finding an ultimate anchor, but about navigating the loops gracefully? Perhaps it's both. The circle of definitions doesn't destroy meaning. It reveals its strange architecture. Like a spiral staircase, it turns endlessly, yet still carries us upward. Even if we never touch the ground, we can still climb. So picture yourself again, holding that heavy dictionary. You look up time, then duration, then measure, then interval. Each step leads to another, until you realize you could spend the rest of your life chasing words through the maze of language. You might never find the original meaning you hoped for, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe the circle is not a trap, but a mirror showing us that meaning is not a single point to be found, but a network to be explored. Still, the unease remains. If words themselves are loops, what about the reasoning we build upon them? Can proof itself escape the circle, or is even logic trapped in the same endless spiral? That's the paradox of the circle of definitions. It doesn't give us final answers. It only leads us deeper into the loop, into the hall of mirrors, where reflections stretch endlessly in every direction. And in that endless reflection, you might wonder, are we describing reality or only describing descriptions? The infinite proof. Imagine sitting at a table, a single question before you. Why do I believe what I believe? You start tracing your thoughts. You think, because it seems true. That seems reasonable. But then you ask, why does it seem true? Perhaps it aligns with past experience. But why should past experience be trustworthy? Maybe because it has consistently predicted outcomes. Yet that, too, rests on the assumption that the past reliably predicts the future. And so, one reason leads to another, and another, each stacked atop the last like bricks in a tower that climbs endlessly toward the sky. This is the loop of infinite regress in justification, a concept philosophers wrestle with endlessly. The term infinite regress sounds almost mathematical, but its consequences are profoundly human. Every belief we hold, every statement we claim to know, seems to require support. And yet, if each supporting reason must itself be supported, then we are trapped in a chain without end. Knowledge never rests on solid ground. It drifts on a current of reasoning that stretches backward infinitely, like a river with no source, flowing but never arriving. Consider a simple example. Suppose you say, I know the Earth orbits the Sun. You could justify it by pointing to scientific observations, centuries of astronomical measurement, and mathematical models. But why trust those observations and measurements? Because they are accurate, consistent, and verified by experiment. And why do you trust the experiments? Because the methods are reliable. But what makes them reliable? And here the regress begins again. Each step of proof seems solid, yet each step depends on another and another, with no ultimate foundation to settle upon. Perhaps our beliefs are like a ladder dangling in midair, endlessly extended but never anchored. We climb step after step, thinking we are ascending toward certainty. Yet the higher we climb, the more we realize there is no floor beneath us. The ladder sways in the void, each rung supported only by the one below, stretching endlessly into the unseen depths. Philosophers like Aristotle tried to stop this fall, suggesting that some first principles are self-evident. Others, like Hume, embrace the uncertainty, observing that we ultimately rely on assumptions we cannot justify completely. The infinite regress problem is not just an abstract puzzle, it touches everything we claim to know. Mathematics, logic, science, even our most personal beliefs, all encounter this shadow of uncertainty. When you insist on proof for every proof, you find yourself circling endlessly, and the very notion of certainty becomes fragile. Perhaps certainty, if it exists, is not a destination but a feeling we cultivate, a temporary rest on the ladder, before the mind nudges us to climb higher again. Now, consider how this plays out in daily life. Every time we justify a choice, an opinion, or a moral judgment, we might ask ourselves, why do I think this way? The first answer is often simple: intuition, habit, or experience. But if you probe further, every answer generates another question. Why this intuition? Why this habit? Why this experience? Some answers are practical and functional. Some remain forever suspended in abstraction. Infinite regress shows that certainty in human thought is less like a building with a solid foundation and more like a staircase that stretches into a fogged horizon. This loop is not always paralyzing. It can be strangely liberating too. Recognizing the infinite regress allows us to relax the need for absolute proof. If knowledge is a ladder suspended in air, we can choose to climb anyway, acknowledging the instability. We can act, believe, and decide without being crushed by the impossibility of perfect justification. In a way, infinite regress teaches humility. The universe is vast, our minds finite, and some questions may never find ultimate answers. Philosophers have explored ways to escape the loop, though none are entirely satisfying. Foundationalism argues that certain beliefs are self-justifying, basic truths that do not need proof. But deciding which beliefs are foundational is itself contentious. Coherentism suggests that beliefs form a web, each supporting others in a network rather than a linear chain. The web provides stability, yet it too depends on the internal consistency of the system rather than an external anchor. And then there's infinitism, which accepts the endless chain as unavoidable, proposing that justification is a process, never a final state. Each approach has its allure and its flaws, reflecting the profound discomfort humans feel with the idea that certainty might be forever out of reach. Think of infinite regress like a mirror reflecting another mirror. You see yourself repeated into infinity, each reflection slightly fainter than the last. When you ask, "Why is this true?" you see an answer, then another, receding into a distant, unreachable vanishing point. The loop is mesmerizing, hypnotic, and unsettling all at once. And yet, it is part of the texture of thought itself. Logic, reason, and proof are powerful tools, but even they encounter their limits, their edges blurred by the endless chain of justification. Now, imagine this: time itself drawn into the loop. Proofs are anchored in temporal sequences. We observe, reflect, and conclude. But if every reason depends on another, each step reaches backward into a past that is itself uncertain. The past becomes a hall of mirrors, reflecting causes and reasons infinitely backward. Justification is no longer simply a chain. It becomes a labyrinth, and each turn seems identical to the last. Time stretches and folds within the loop, making every moment both present and eternally deferred. The infinite regress of proof forces us to confront an uncomfortable idea. Perhaps nothing ever rests completely on firm ground. Perhaps belief is always provisional, a structure suspended in the air of thought, held together by the coherence of our reasoning rather than by ultimate certainty. This does not make knowledge meaningless, it merely reveals its delicate, ephemeral nature. To understand the world, we do not need absolute certainty. We need coherence, usefulness, and the courage to act even when the foundations sway. And so, as we dwell in this loop, it becomes almost meditative. Each reason gives rise to another, each proof points to another proof. The mind can trace the chain endlessly, like a river flowing backward, feeling both vertigo and wonder. In this infinite regress, we sense the vastness of thought, the impossibility of absolute arrival, and the quiet beauty of questioning itself. Knowledge is not a destination. It is the journey along the ladder, rung by rung, in perpetual ascent. Transitioning from this, consider what happens when the very fabric of time is pulled into the loop. If reasoning itself loops infinitely, and each reason is temporally bound, then our understanding of past, present, and future begins to twist. Time no longer moves straightforwardly. It loops, spirals, and folds within the endless regress. And just as proof never finds a final anchor, moments never fully arrive. They are observed, reflected upon, and extended infinitely backward, a river without source, flowing eternally in its own logic. The infinite proof does not demand despair. Instead, it invites reflection, patience, and a calm appreciation for the subtle architecture of thought. Each step of justification, each chain of reasons, is part of the tapestry of understanding. We may never find absolute certainty, but the journey itself, the endless probing, questioning, and reasoning, is rich, immersive, and endlessly fascinating. And as our minds wander through this infinite regress, we glimpse the strange, quiet beauty of a universe in which thought itself can be infinite. The Bootstrap paradox. Imagine, for a moment, holding a book in your hands. Its cover is worn, the pages yellowed with age. You leaf through it, captivated by its words, its ideas. But then consider this. Someone from the future has traveled back in time and handed this very book to an author long ago. Inspired, the author writes the exact same book, word for word, which will later be discovered by the time traveler, completing the loop. And so the book exists without a true origin. It simply circulates, a perfect loop in time. The question arises, who actually wrote it? There seems to be no first author, no origin point. The book exists because it exists, self-contained and self-perpetuating. This is the Bootstrap paradox. The Bootstrap paradox is one of the strangest and most unsettling puzzles of time travel. Unlike ordinary causality, where cause precedes effect in a clear sequence, the Bootstrap paradox presents a loop where cause and effect become intertwined, indistinguishable, and recursive. Something exists without a clear source, appearing fully formed because it has been transported from the future into the past. In this loop, the usual rules of creation and origin seem suspended. Information, objects, or even events can exist without ever being created in the first place. They simply loop, self-sustaining and unanchored. Consider the implications of such a loop. Our usual understanding of the world relies on the principle of causality. Every effect has a cause. Every creation has an origin. The Bootstrap paradox defies this principle. It suggests that perhaps origins are not as absolute as we assume. If something can exist without being created, if it can be bootstrapped from the future into the past, then beginnings may be illusions rather than fixed points. The universe, in this scenario, is less a linear sequence of cause and effect, and more a tapestry of loops, knots, and spirals where time is not a straight line but a circle or perhaps a helix that folds back on itself. To grasp the paradox more concretely, imagine a musician receives a composition from a time traveler. The musician learns it, performs it, and the music eventually reaches the traveler, who then brings it back in time to the musician. The piece exists, yet its origin remains a mystery. Who composed it? The traveler? The musician? Or does the question itself lose meaning in the context of a loop? The paradox destabilizes our most basic intuitions about creation and authorship. It asks us to imagine a reality in which beginnings and endings are less definitive than we believe. The Bootstrap paradox also stretches beyond objects or information. It can apply to ideas, discoveries, inventions, and knowledge itself. Suppose a mathematician in the past receives the solution to a theorem from someone who learned it in the future. The theorem is solved, yet no one ever originally solved it. Knowledge circulates as if time itself were a library, cataloging ideas that have no point of origin. It's a mind-bending reflection on the nature of thought and invention. The past becomes a repository of the future, and the future is intertwined with the past, erasing the distinction between creation and repetition. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Bootstrap paradox is its relationship with time itself. Our experience of time is linear, past, present, future. But the paradox suggests that time may be more fluid, more like a looping river than a straight road. Events may influence themselves retroactively, information may travel backward, and the distinction between cause and effect may dissolve entirely. Philosophers and physicists speculate about such scenarios, imagining universes where time is not absolute, but relative and malleable. In these loops, beginnings are not fixed, endings are not guaranteed, and existence itself seems strangely self-contained. The Bootstrap paradox raises profound questions about identity and authorship. If a person creates something based on information from the future, are they truly the originator? Does originality exist in a loop timeline? Or is every act of creation inherently borrowed from a future yet to unfold? Perhaps originality itself is an illusion, a perception of creation that collapses when traced along the lines of time. In this context, the paradox challenges not only physics but philosophy, asking us to reconsider how we define creativity, agency, and authorship. It is also unsettling because it introduces a form of temporal determinism. If the loop is fixed, if the book, the composition, or the theorem must always exist in this cycle, then the future is already intertwined with the past. Choice and free will appear constrained, folded into a self-perpetuating loop. The paradox whispers that events might not be free to happen differently. They must happen exactly as they do, because the loop demands it. Yet at the same time, the loop is invisible, seamless. To those inside it, time appears normal, linear, and continuous until one attempts to step outside and observe the circle. The bootstrap paradox also reminds us of the strangeness of infinite loops, echoing what we explored with infinite regress in belief. In both cases, linear assumptions break down. Just as justification can extend backward infinitely without reaching a foundation, a time loop can extend backward without an origin, sustaining itself indefinitely. Both invite contemplation of reality's fragile architecture, revealing that what we perceive as solid, as beginning or end, may in fact be a complex dance of recursion, repetition, and endless reflection. Consider a more subtle, everyday analogy. Memories themselves can resemble a bootstrap loop. We remember events, and those memories shape the stories we tell, which influence how we perceive the past and predict the future. The past is not fixed. It is constantly reconstructed through the lens of present knowledge and expectation. In a sense, our minds are small-scale time loops, where information is constantly fed back into itself, shaping our understanding of what has already occurred. The bootstrap paradox, then, is not entirely alien. It mirrors a phenomenon we experience internally every day. And yet, there is a beauty in the paradox. It shows that existence, information, and creativity can be self-sustaining, independent of origin. The universe may be stranger than we imagine, looping in on itself, with knowledge and objects circulating like particles in a perpetual, self-sufficient cycle. Time is no longer merely a sequence of moments. It is a structure capable of bending back on itself, carrying objects, ideas, and truths in a perfect, endless circuit. The paradox invites us to dwell on mystery rather than seek resolution. Asking, who created the book, may be the wrong question, just as asking, why is the ladder anchored, misses the point of infinite regress. The point is the loop itself, the impossibility of pinning down a beginning, the self-contained elegance of a system without origin, and the strange satisfaction of a closed cycle that exists simply because it does. The paradox embodies the mind's fascination with infinity, continuity, and self-reference, echoing the loops we find in logic, mathematics, and human thought. And so, as we linger in this paradox, we feel the subtle vertigo of time itself bending. The book, the music, the theorem, each exists simultaneously in past and future, cause and effect intertwined, without origin. The mind is drawn into the loop, tracing the circuit, contemplating beginnings that may never exist, and marveling at a universe that allows such wonders. The paradox is both unsettling and beautiful, a meditation on the fluidity of time and the mysterious ways in which information can persist, circulate, and inspire without a clear source. From loops in time, we step into loops of prediction, where knowledge itself betrays us. Just as the book appears without origin, our attempts to predict the future may create loops of expectation and causation, revealing that certainty is always provisional and that the very act of knowing can reshape reality itself. The paradox of the unexpected hanging. Imagine, for a moment, a small, dimly lit prison cell. Its walls are bare, yet the air feels heavy with anticipation. Inside sits a prisoner, pacing slowly, counting the days on the cold stone floor. One day, a judge enters and delivers a sentence that seems at first almost casual, almost absurd. Next week, you will be hanged on a day you do not expect. The words hang in the air, curious and unnerving, and the prisoner retreats to his thoughts, trying to make sense of this seemingly simple statement. At first glance, it appears straightforward. A week stretches ahead, 7 days, each a potential day of execution. But the prisoner is clever, perhaps over-clever, and begins to reason. If he cannot be hanged unexpectedly, then logically, the last day of the week cannot be the day. Why? Because if the execution had not yet occurred by the day before the last, then the final day would be inevitable. He would expect it, and it would not be a surprise. Eliminating the final day, he turns his attention to the penultimate day. But now, with the last day removed from possibility, the second to last day becomes predictable. The reasoning cascades backward, day by day, until he convinces himself that no day could ever truly surprise him. Satisfied with his logic, the prisoner relaxes. He is certain he has outwitted the system, certain he has discovered the loophole that will render the judge's sentence impossible. He feels safe, even secure. But then, one ordinary morning, perhaps a Wednesday or Thursday, the guards arrive quietly, and before he can adjust his thoughts or brace himself, the sentence is carried out. Shock grips him. How could this be? He had reasoned it all away. He had imagined and eliminated every possibility. Yet, here it is, the unexpected event, unfolding exactly as predicted to be impossible. This is the unexpected hanging paradox, a situation where logic guarantees its own undoing. It forces us to confront a reality that seems to defy reason. The prisoner's careful, meticulous reasoning, intended to grant him certainty and control, instead collapses under the weight of the very logic he trusted. His foresight, rather than protecting him, becomes irrelevant in the face of the paradox. The more he tries to anticipate and contain the future, the more entangled he becomes in the cycle of surprise. What makes this paradox so compelling and unsettling is that it exposes the fragile boundary between certainty and contradiction. We tend to believe that logical reasoning, applied carefully, can produce predictable outcomes. We trust that thought can dominate reality, that if we map every possibility, we can master the unknown. Yet the unexpected hanging reminds us that reality has its own subtle ways of subverting our assumptions. Sometimes, the act of predicting changes the outcome, and the very certainty we rely upon becomes a trap. Philosophers and mathematicians have wrestled with the unexpected hanging paradox for decades, exploring what it tells us about knowledge, time, and expectation. Some see it as a cautionary tale about self-reference, a concept familiar from logic and mathematics, where statements can refer to themselves in ways that create loops or contradictions. The prisoner's reasoning is self-referential. He reasons about his own expectations, and in doing so, creates a cycle that can never resolve. It mirrors other logical conundrums, like the liar paradox, where a statement such as "this sentence is false" entangles truth and falsehood in an endless dance. Yet the paradox also resonates beyond the abstract realm of logic. It touches on something profoundly human, our desire for control in an uncertain world. We spend much of our lives trying to predict, to anticipate, to prepare. From mundane tasks like planning our day to grand ventures like forecasting economic trends, we trust our reasoning to shield us from surprise. But life, like the unexpected hanging, often operates according to rules that evade simple calculation. It reminds us that anticipation itself can be unreliable, that certainty is a fragile construct, and that even our most disciplined minds are vulnerable to the unforeseen. There is also a subtle psychological dimension here. The paradox teaches us that expectation is a complex, self-modifying phenomenon. When we expect something, our anticipation shapes our perception of events. The prisoner's reasoning changed his own mental landscape. By eliminating days in his mind, he created a framework that both predicted and invalidated the execution simultaneously. In a sense, he trapped himself in a loop of expectation, a mental labyrinth where certainty becomes impossible. The paradox, then, is not only a puzzle of logic, it is a mirror to the workings of consciousness itself. Consider, too, the ethical undertones of the paradox. The judge's sentence seems cruel, even arbitrary, yet it is bound by logic. It exposes the tension between authority, reason, and human experience. Rules can be precise, yet the lived reality of those subject to them may be anything but predictable. The prisoner's shock is both literal and symbolic. It reflects the inherent unpredictability of life and the limitations of reason when applied to events that involve perception, expectation, and surprise. Some interpretations extend the paradox into time itself. If the prisoner could somehow see the entire week as one complete entity, would the paradox still hold? Does knowledge of all future events necessarily eliminate surprise? Or does the very act of knowing alter what is experienced? In this sense, the unexpected hanging touches on deeper questions about determinism, free will, and the flow of time. It hints at the idea that prediction is never passive. It interacts with reality, sometimes in ways we cannot foresee. As we contemplate the paradox, we also glimpse the eerie beauty of uncertainty. The unexpected hanging is unsettling precisely because it challenges the neat frameworks we construct in our minds. It refuses to conform to expectation, revealing a layer of reality where logic and experience diverge. There is a quiet, almost meditative lesson here: to accept the limits of prediction, to recognize that some elements of existence will always elude anticipation, and to find calm within that unpredictability. And if the unexpected can emerge even when we think we know everything, then what does this imply for the more intricate structures of our lives? If prediction can loop endlessly, undoing itself, what about the very fabric of identity? Just as the prisoner cannot fully predict the day of his fate, can we ever fully predict the course of our thoughts, our choices, ourselves? The paradox invites us to consider that identity, like expectation, may be more fluid than fixed, more enigmatic than we assume. In the quiet aftermath of the prisoner's shock, we are left with a lingering question: what does it mean to truly know something? And what does it mean to be caught off guard? Perhaps the unexpected hanging is less a puzzle to be solved than a meditation on the interplay between knowledge and surprise, between reason and experience. It reminds us that certainty is often provisional, that logic can fold back upon itself, and that the mind, in its quest for understanding, may be both liberated and ensnared by its own reasoning. The paradox does not offer comfort, nor does it yield an easy solution. Instead, it invites reflection, a slow turning of the mind around a problem that is more about the journey than the destination. In that sense, it is perfectly suited for quiet contemplation, for moments when we seek to observe the delicate, unsettling structures of thought without needing to conquer them. Like a whisper in a silent room, the unexpected hanging lingers, a reminder that reality, at its core, may be as unpredictable as it is intricate, and that even in the realm of reason, there is room for wonder, shock, and the infinite loops of expectation. The ship that never stays the same. Picture a grand ship resting in a quiet harbor. Its sails are furled, its hull glinting in the morning sun, and for decades it has weathered storms and tides, carrying sailors across oceans and continents. Time passes, and the ship, like all things, begins to wear. A plank here rots, a beam there splinters, and gradually the ship is repaired, piece by piece, plank by plank. Each replacement is faithful, each repair meticulous, until, at last, not a single original plank remains. Every part of the ship has been replaced, yet the vessel continues to sail, carrying on its name, its history, and its legacy. Here arises a question that has puzzled philosophers for centuries. Is it still the same ship? If none of its original parts remain, can we truly call it the Ship of Theseus? Or has it become something new, a replica that only imitates the past? And if, by some curious twist, the old planks are gathered and reconstructed into a ship, which one is the real ship? The one that sails continuously, rebuilt over time, or the one reassembled from the original components? The question may seem abstract, even whimsical, but it strikes at the heart of how we understand identity, continuity, and existence itself. This is the Ship of Theseus paradox, a loop of identity where continuity and change intertwine so tightly that the notion of a fixed, permanent self becomes impossible to define without contradiction. It is a puzzle not just of objects, but of essence. At what point does replacement alter the identity of a thing? And if every component can be substituted, can identity survive at all? Or is it merely a convenient story we tell ourselves to impose order on change? To grasp the depth of this paradox, consider the ship's journey. Each plank is replaced, not all at once, but gradually, imperceptibly. A casual observer might see the ship and notice nothing unusual. The ship seems continuous, the same as it always was. Yet under the surface, every element has shifted, every part has been renewed. Slowly, the original structure disappears into memory, leaving only the idea of the ship intact. Identity here is not in the material, but in the continuity of perception and function. The paradox challenges this notion. If all is replaced, is the continuity itself enough to claim sameness, or is it an illusion, a shadow of persistence projected by our minds? Now imagine the second ship, built from the original planks, carefully reassembled as a mirror of the original vessel. This ship has the tangible material continuity that the rebuilt ship lacks. Every plank, every beam, every nail comes from the first iteration, yet it has not experienced the passage of time, the storms, or the voyages. It exists as a perfect reconstruction, a vessel that has never truly sailed the seas it is meant to traverse. Which ship, then, is the real ship? The one that has lived through time, whose story is uninterrupted, or the one whose matter is faithful to the original, yet whose lived history is absent? This puzzle extends beyond ships and planks. It echoes in the very fabric of ourselves. Consider the human body. Our cells are in a constant state of turnover. Most of the cells in our body are replaced over the course of a few years. Skin, blood, and even parts of internal organs renew themselves, leaving us physically quite different from who we were a decade ago. And yet, despite this ongoing change, we experience a sense of continuity. We call ourselves by the same name, remember the same events, and feel that our core identity persists. But is it truly the same self? Or are we, like the Ship of Theseus, an endlessly shifting collection of parts, connected only by memory, consciousness, and perception? The philosophical implications are staggering. If identity can endure amidst total physical replacement, what is identity truly anchored to? Is it memory, consciousness, pattern, or some intangible essence that defies material explanation? And if we can reconstruct identity in a new assembly, just as the old planks of the ship might form another vessel, does that imply the possibility of duplication? Could there be two real versions of the same self, each authentic in its own right, yet distinct in history and experience? Science adds a further layer of fascination. Neuroscience shows that our brains are also in flux. Neurons form new connections, old ones dissolve, and even our neural patterns change subtly over time. Our thoughts, preferences, and reactions evolve as we learn, adapt, and grow. Yet the mind has a remarkable ability to weave these changes into a continuous narrative. We tell ourselves stories of personal history, creating a coherent thread that links our past to our present. The Ship of Theseus paradox mirrors this process perfectly. The material changes, yet the story persists, carrying forward the sense of identity even when the substance is transformed. The paradox also has eerie, almost unsettling implications when considered in the realm of consciousness and selfhood. Imagine a version of yourself gradually replaced, neuron by neuron, cell by cell, until no original matter remains. You wake each day feeling familiar, thinking familiar thoughts, recalling memories. Yet fundamentally, everything that constitutes your physical being is new. Are you the same person, or merely a copy that carries forward the illusion of continuity? And if your original cells were used to reconstruct a separate body, complete with your memories and patterns, would that be you? Could identity be split, duplicated, or redistributed, leaving us to question the very boundaries of self? Philosophers have wrestled with this for millennia. Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, famously noted that no man ever steps in the same river twice. Like the river, we are in constant flux, yet we cling to the notion of permanence, of selfhood that survives time. The Ship of Theseus is a tangible expression of this principle. It forces us to confront the tension between change and continuity, between material reality and the stories we tell about ourselves. It is a mirror reflecting the instability of everything we think we know about existence. In the modern world, the paradox takes on even more profound resonance. Consider digital identity. Our online personas are continuously updated, edited, and curated. Over time, our profiles, histories, and digital footprints evolve, yet we perceive them as representing the same person. Similarly, artificial intelligence can store patterns, learn, and adapt, creating versions of self that exist apart from physical form. The Ship of Theseus is no longer confined to timber and sail. It lives in code, in memory, in consciousness, and in the interplay between matter and perception. This paradox also touches on mortality and impermanence. Every day, cells die, experiences pass, and moments are lost to time. Yet identity persists, stitched together by consciousness and continuity. There is a subtle melancholy here. We are never truly static, never entirely ourselves in any single instant. Our bodies, our minds, and even our memories are provisional, subject to change. and yet we cling to the comfort of permanence. The Ship of Theseus reminds us that identity is less about substance and more about persistence, the pattern of continuity, the story that binds together all the fragments of existence. And yet, there is also beauty in this impermanence. The constant change, the renewal of matter, and the flow of time all contribute to the richness of experience. We are both familiar and strange to ourselves, evolving beings navigating a world of ceaseless transformation. Identity is not a rigid construct but a dynamic tapestry, woven from countless threads of experience, memory, and perception. The paradox teaches us that continuity is not static. It is a living process, a loop that sustains itself even as its components shift and decay. The Ship of Theseus is more than a thought experiment. It is a meditation on existence itself. It invites us to consider how we persist, how we evolve, and how we anchor ourselves in a world where everything is in motion. It challenges us to accept that identity may be fluid, contingent, and, at times, paradoxical. And as we reflect on this, we can see the subtle connection to the earlier paradoxes of time, prediction, and expectation. Just as the unexpected hanging showed that certainty can collapse under its own reasoning, the Ship of Theseus reveals that identity can endure amidst total transformation, looping endlessly between continuity and change. And if identity circles endlessly, endlessly reassembling and transforming, what of nothingness itself? Can absence escape the loop? If Eve itself is a river of change, flowing and reforming, then perhaps nothingness, too, is caught in the same paradoxical dance, a void that may never truly be empty, a space that loops back on itself in ways our minds struggle to comprehend. The Ship of Theseus leaves us with this quiet, unsettling thought. To exist is to change, to persist is to loop, and even the absence of being may be part of the endless cycle of transformation. The loop of nothingness. Try to imagine absolute nothing. Close your eyes, if you like, and reach for it in your mind. What does it feel like to grasp nothing? Not just the absence of things around you, but the absence of everything. No time ticking by, no space stretching, no thoughts drifting, no sense of self, no awareness at all. A void so complete that it swallows existence itself. The very idea might feel unsettling, even frightening. Yet here is the strange twist. The moment you try to imagine nothing, you've already failed. By imagining it, you've made it something. Something you can hold in your mind, even if it's only as a concept, a shadow of an idea. This is the paradox of non-existence. The closer you try to approach true nothingness, the more it slips away, folding back into being. To think of nothing is to contradict it. Nothingness cannot stand where thought is allowed, because thought alone births presence. The loop consumes itself. In attempting to reach zero, you've drawn a line in the sand. You've placed a point in space. You've created a boundary around a concept that refuses boundaries. In other words, non-existence, as a concept, cannot exist. It folds into existence simply by the act of recognition. Philosophers have long wrestled with this. Parmenides, one of the earliest thinkers to ponder the nature of being, argued that nothing cannot be because even naming it affirms its being. If we say nothing exists, we have already drawn attention to something, however abstract, by giving it a name, a form, a sentence. Heidegger would later echo this, suggesting that the human mind cannot confront absolute nothingness without shaping it into being. Even in trying to dissolve into the void, the mind leaves footprints, marks of its attempt to vanish. And so the loop forms. You chase nothing. You think of nothing. You realize that thinking alone turns nothing into something. And you are back at the start, staring at the same impossibility. Try a different angle. Imagine a universe where nothing exists. No stars, no atoms, no light, no darkness, no time. A blank canvas so complete that even the concept of a canvas cannot exist. Can you truly picture it? You might think you can, but as soon as the idea enters your mind, as soon as the image or anti-image takes shape, it is no longer nothing. The act of imagining brings it into existence in the form of a thought, a faint echo, a spark against the infinite black. The nothing you sought has become something. This loop, An endless circle of pursuit and failure is inherent to consciousness. It is not an error or a puzzle to be solved. It is simply the way reality insists on being, even when confronted with its opposite. The paradox stretches beyond the mind and into the nature of reality itself. In physics, the vacuum of space is often described as nothing, but even empty space seethes with activity. Quantum fluctuations, ghost particles, and invisible fields ripple constantly through what we perceive as emptiness. Even the universe's apparent void cannot escape being. Here, science mirrors philosophy. Even nothingness, when observed or measured, turns into a field of somethingness. The cosmos refuses absence. Existence is unavoidable, even when the mind strives to escape into the void, or when the universe attempts to create absolute emptiness. Some trace of presence endures. Perhaps this is a reflection of the universe's insistence on being. Perhaps non-existence is a concept that exists only in contrast to existence. And without that contrast, the idea cannot hold. To name nothing is to anchor it in reality. To chase it is to affirm it. And the loop continues, endlessly, quietly, hauntingly. We reach for nothing. We grasp it. We realize our grasp transforms it. And the loop begins again. It is a self-consuming circle, a mirror reflecting back on itself, a reminder that reality is persistent, unyielding, and impossible to escape. There is a subtle beauty in this. Nothingness, in its paradoxical nature, is also a gateway to reflection. When we attempt to imagine the void, we confront the limits of thought. We confront the boundaries of existence. We recognize that our minds, fragile and finite as they are, can never fully extinguish the spark of being. In that sense, the loop of nothingness is also a loop of awareness. It teaches us that being is unavoidable, and that consciousness, by its very nature, keeps reality alive even when it seems absent. Even poetry and art struggle with this paradox. Poets have tried to capture the void, artists to paint the emptiness, musicians to sound the silence. And yet, in every attempt, their medium, words, colors, notes, transforms absence into presence. The canvas is never empty, the silence never silent, the void never void. Each creation is a witness to the impossibility of true nothingness, a manifestation of the loop at play. The very act of noticing, of representing, of giving form, completes the paradox. Meditation, too, touches on this loop. In deep meditation, one might try to empty the mind completely. Thoughts are observed, acknowledged, and released. The practitioner aims to reach a state of absolute void. Yet even in the deepest silence, awareness persists. Even in letting go of all things, the mind is still aware of letting go. The loop of nothingness asserts itself once more. The very attempt to vanish brings attention, and attention itself becomes a form of existence. The deeper one tries to sink into nothing, the more the paradox sharpens. It is an elegant trap. Freedom and absence are inseparable from presence. Perhaps this is why the concept of nothingness is both terrifying and fascinating. It is a mirror held up to existence, reflecting not emptiness, but the persistence of being. The loop of nothingness is not merely a logical or philosophical exercise. It is an experiential truth. It reminds us that reality cannot be undone by thought alone, that the mind, even in its desire to vanish into the void, is part of the universe it seeks to escape, and that the universe, in turn, refuses the erasure of thought, of existence, of itself. So we circle, endlessly, like a serpent eating its tail. We reach for the void, we hold it, it dissolves into something, and the chase begins anew. Nothingness cannot exist because the very act of imagining it ensures its opposite. It is a cosmic joke, gentle and cruel, a riddle without a solution. Yet in that riddle lies a strange kind of calm. The loop of nothingness assures us that reality is persistent, that existence endures, and that even in moments of emptiness, the universe remains present. It is a reminder that being is unavoidable, that presence is eternal, and that thought itself, in trying to dissolve, only reinforces its own being. In this way, the loop of nothingness is also a loop of reflection. It invites us to pause, to observe, to witness the paradox without needing to resolve it. It allows the mind to rest in the tension between absence and presence, to float in the silent echo of a void that cannot exist. And in this quiet contemplation, we begin to see the profound lesson hidden in the loop, that reality, in all its forms, is unavoidable, and that even the mind's attempt to escape simply reinforces its presence. From the void, let us climb into the loop of self-reference, where statements devour themselves. Just as nothingness cannot exist without becoming something, words and logic too can spiral inward, consuming themselves, forming patterns that twist and reflect endlessly, inviting us into a new kind of infinite mirror. The journey continues, and the mind remains both observer and participant, circling the loops of reality and thought, endlessly, quietly, inexorably. The Barber's Paradox. Imagine a small, quiet town where life moves at a gentle, predictable pace. In this town lives a barber, a man whose job is simple, or so it seems. His rule is precise. He shaves everyone who does not shave themselves. On the surface, it is a straightforward arrangement. Those who cannot, or do not, shave themselves come to him, and he ensures they are clean-shaven, neat, and tidy. Life seems ordered, logical. Yet, as soon as you pose a single question, the order collapses. Who shaves the barber? At first, you might smile. Perhaps you think, well, the barber must shave himself, right? But pause. If he shaves himself, then by the very rule that defines his job, he must not shave himself. He shaves only those who do not shave themselves. If he does it, he breaks the rule. Then consider the opposite. Maybe he does not shave himself. That seems safe. Yet then, according to the same rule, he must shave himself, because he shaves all those who do not shave themselves. The thought spins in circles, and you realize there is no answer, no stable resolution. The question folds in on itself, a Mobius strip of logic. This is the Barber's Paradox, introduced by Bertrand Russell in the early 20th century. It seems like a playful puzzle at first, a riddle to amuse the mathematically curious. But the implications run far deeper. Russell, one of the giants of logic and philosophy, used this paradox to expose a profound truth. Even the most disciplined systems of thought can contain contradictions, loops that are impossible to reconcile. The paradox isn't about barbers or towns. It is about the structure of logic itself, about the fragile foundations upon which mathematics and reasoning are built. To understand why this is unsettling, it helps to see it in a broader context. Logic, at its best, promises certainty. If your premises are clear and your rules are consistent, you should be able to derive conclusions with absolute confidence. And yet, the Barber's paradox shows that certain arrangements of rules are inherently self-contradictory. The very act of defining who shaves whom in this way produces a loop, a cycle that has no resolution. It is a trap that logic can walk into and never escape. Think of the paradox as a mirror turned on itself. The barber looks in the mirror to see who he shaves, but the mirror reflects only an impossible scene. If he shaves himself, he does not. If he does not, he does. There is no point in the mirror where the image is consistent with reality. This image of impossibility is quiet, subtle, yet deeply disturbing. It is a reminder that not all questions can be answered within the rules we create. Some questions are designed, by their very nature, to have no answer at all. The paradox also extends beyond mathematics into everyday life, into the way we think and the way we structure knowledge. Whenever we attempt to categorize or define something in absolute terms, there is a risk of producing a self-contradiction. Consider lists and hierarchies, where each item is supposed to fit neatly into a category. There are often elements that defy such neat classification. They fold back into themselves. They are the logical equivalent of the barber, neither fully inside nor fully outside, neither fully true nor fully false. Russell's paradox, as it is sometimes called in the context of set theory, is closely related to the barber's paradox. In mathematics, it arises when considering the set of all sets that do not contain themselves. If such a set exists, does it contain itself? If it does, it contradicts its definition. If it does not, then by definition it must. The structure is identical to the barber's dilemma. It shook the foundations of mathematics, forcing logicians to reconsider how sets could be safely defined, and giving birth to new, more cautious systems of logic designed to avoid such contradictions. There is an eerie beauty in this paradox. It reminds us that the universe of thought is not always linear or tidy. There are edges, folds, and loops that can trap even the sharpest minds. The barber sits in his small shop, scissors in hand, and yet the scissors are useless when faced with the paradox. They cannot cut a loop. There is no way to snip the self-reference without unraveling the whole system. Yet perhaps there is comfort in this. The paradox tells us something profound about the limits of certainty. Life itself is full of questions that loop back on themselves. We ask, who am I? Or what is truth? Or why do we exist? And the answers fold into new questions, repeating endlessly. The barber's paradox is a gentle echo of this experience, a mathematical whisper reminding us that not all things need or can have a final answer. The absence of resolution is not failure. It is a feature of the structure of thought itself. And so, we return to the barber. Imagine him quietly, patiently, sitting in the morning light, facing a line of townspeople. Each comes for a shave. Each leaves clean and tidy. Yet in his own mind, the question remains unresolved. Who shaves the barber? Perhaps he does not know. Perhaps he has learned to sit with the paradox, to accept that some loops have no exit. In this way, the barber becomes a symbol, not just of logical puzzles, but of the human condition, forever circling the edges of questions that cannot be fully answered. The paradox invites us to reflect on the nature of rules, of systems, of logic itself. It whispers a subtle warning. Any system capable of self-reference risks contradiction, yet it also whispers a promise. Even in loops with no escape, even in questions that cannot be answered, there is insight to be gained. The journey around the loop sharpens the mind, hones the senses, deepens the awareness. The paradox is a landscape of thought, a quiet, infinite corridor through which we walk, step by careful step. Ultimately, the barber's paradox is not merely a puzzle to be solved. It is an experience to be felt, a gentle hum at the edges of logic, reminding us that some things are meant to be contemplated rather than concluded. There is a strange serenity in circling endlessly, in witnessing a system that cannot resolve itself. The barber, the townspeople, the rules, all are part of a pattern larger than themselves, a loop in which the act of questioning creates meaning even if the answer remains forever elusive. And as we let this idea settle in our minds, we notice something profound. Loops, paradoxes, self-reference. These are not confined to logic or mathematics. They exist in thought itself. Every time we reflect, every time we ponder, we risk stepping into a loop, chasing a thought that folds back into itself. In philosophy, in mathematics, in life, the loops are all around us, subtle and quiet, waiting for us to notice. The barber's paradox is one of the clearest examples, but it is only a doorway, a single window into the infinite landscapes of thought. So let your mind linger here, on the edge of certainty. Let the paradox resonate quietly, like a soft echo in an empty room. Accept the impossibility and notice the patterns, the subtle beauty of a system that defies resolution. In the end, the barber may remain unshaved, the loop unresolved, and that is enough. The journey through the paradox is the reward, a calm, reflective walk through the infinite corridors of logic, a reminder that some questions are meant to circle endlessly, and that even in the absence of answers, there is understanding. But loops are not only in logic or language, they are in thought itself. Every time we reflect, every time we question, we may find ourselves circling endlessly, tracing patterns that fold back on themselves, discovering that the mind is its own infinite landscape, full of questions that have no final answers. The loop of self-doubt. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine sitting alone in a quiet room, your thoughts turning inward. You begin with a single statement: I doubt everything. Perhaps it starts as a curiosity, a philosophical experiment, or maybe it is a subtle, persistent feeling that creeps in quietly, uncertainty about your perceptions, your beliefs, your conclusions. Doubt is a familiar companion in such moments, a soft echo in the corridors of the mind. But what happens when doubt turns inward upon itself? The answer is not comforting. It is an infinite loop, a hall of mirrors with no exit. Consider the first layer, You doubt everything around you. You question facts, events, and experiences. The sky may appear blue, but perhaps it is not. Or perhaps your mind deceives you. You read a book, but can you trust the words? You listen to advice, but can you trust the voice that speaks? Each thought becomes a question. Each certainty becomes a shadow. The world itself seems fluid, intangible, as if held together only by fragile threads of assumption. Doubt spreads like ripples across a still pond, touching everything it encounters. Then, the second layer emerges almost imperceptibly. If you doubt everything, you must also doubt the doubt itself. The act of questioning is no longer safe ground. How do you know your doubt is valid? What if your doubt is itself an illusion, a trick your mind plays to feel in control, to assert some sense of critical thinking? At this point, you cannot trust even your skepticism. You have entered a loop that feeds on itself. Every doubt generates another, and each new doubt pulls you deeper into the spiral. This is what philosophers call the infinite regress of skepticism. Every assertion, every thought, every conclusion is examined, questioned, and deconstructed. No certainty seems secure. You look for a foundation, a rock upon which to rest your mind, but the foundation is elusive. Every pillar you place to support understanding collapses under the weight of further doubt. The mind spins quietly, like a pendulum swinging in an endless arc, never settling, never at rest. René Descartes, one of history's most profound thinkers, faced this very challenge. He sought certainty in a world of doubt. He doubted everything, the senses, the external world, even the laws of logic. And yet, in the depths of this skepticism, he found a foothold. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Thought itself could not be doubted, because the very act of doubting confirmed the existence of a thinking self. It was a slender thread of certainty, a moment of clarity in the swirling fog of uncertainty. But even this thread is not immune to examination. Can we doubt Descartes' reasoning? Some philosophers have asked whether the act of thinking necessarily confirms existence in the way Descartes proposed. Perhaps the I that thinks is illusory. Perhaps the thought itself exists, but the thinker does not. The mirror of self-reflection turns inward again, fracturing, duplicating, multiplying infinitely. Even the strongest certainty can be questioned, folded back into the labyrinth of doubt. And here lies the eeriness of the loop. The mind becomes a self-referential system, examining itself continuously. Each time you attempt to step outside doubt, to find a secure vantage, the next layer of reflection reveals another uncertainty. Like a hall of mirrors in a dark room, every reflection is a reflection of another reflection, stretching away into infinity. You see yourself, doubting yourself, and the image multiplies endlessly, each one slightly different, each one whispering the possibility that you are wrong, or perhaps that you do not even exist as you believe. This loop is not merely philosophical, it is psychological. In moments of intense introspection, many people feel this self-referential doubt acutely. You wonder if your emotions are real, if your memories are reliable, if your judgments are valid. And when you begin to question the questioning, the structure of thought itself becomes unstable. It is a quiet unease, subtle yet profound, a sense that the mind is a machine spinning in its own gears, unable to disengage. Yet within this unsettling pattern, there is also a strange beauty. The infinite regress of doubt mirrors the infinite complexity of consciousness. Each layer of questioning is an opportunity to examine assumptions, to refine understanding, to grow. The Hall of Mirrors is not only a trap, it is also a landscape for exploration. You learn to move gently through it, noticing the subtle shifts in reflection, seeing how each layer informs the next, and recognizing the mind's capacity for self-examination. Think of it as a gentle spiral rather than a prison. Each loop does not necessarily lead to despair. It can also lead to insight. By acknowledging the layers of doubt, you cultivate humility, patience, and awareness. You begin to see that certainty is rarely absolute, and that the act of questioning is itself a form of engagement with reality. In a sense, the infinite regress is a meditation, a quiet practice of turning the mind inward and observing its own structure. There is also a paradoxical comfort in knowing that doubt is infinite. The loop ensures that no thought is final, no judgment absolute. In a world of ever-shifting circumstances, this flexibility can be liberating. It teaches the mind to hold complexity without collapsing into rigid certainty. The mind learns to walk the edge between confidence and uncertainty, to accept the presence of questions without needing immediate answers. And so, the loop of self-doubt is both a challenge and a guide. It reminds us of our limits, of the subtle fragility of certainty, but it also invites us to a deeper engagement with our own minds. Each layer of doubt is not an obstacle, but a step on a path of introspection. The mind, circling endlessly, becomes aware of its own patterns, its own mechanisms, its own echoes. In observing these loops, we touch something fundamental: the way thought arises, folds, and turns back upon itself. Perhaps, in the end, the loop is inescapable. Perhaps the mind is destined to circle endlessly, chasing understanding that always retreats one step ahead. And yet, the journey is meaningful precisely because it has no final destination. The act of moving through the loop, noticing its contours, experiencing its reflections, this is the essence of consciousness. It is the quiet hum of thought itself, the endless dance of reflection and self-reflection. Imagine now sitting with your thoughts in silence, following each layer of doubt as it spirals outward and folds inward again. You may feel vertigo, a gentle disorientation, as certainty dissolves. Yet there is also a sense of wonder, a profound engagement with the structure of mind. You see the patterns of reflection, the interplay of doubt and awareness, the delicate architecture of self-examination. Even without resolution, there is insight. Even without certainty, there is understanding. And as we linger here, the realization dawns. Loops are not just in logic or language, they are embedded in consciousness itself. Thought, reflection, and doubt are self-referential, recursive, infinite. Every question folds into another. Every reflection contains echoes of itself. Every certainty is shadowed by the possibility of contradiction. The hall of mirrors stretches on endlessly, quiet and patient, a companion for those who dare to follow the mind inward. And if the mind circles forever, what happens when these loops touch the very edges of reality, when thought spirals into the infinite, and consciousness itself begins to fold in on itself? The Euthyphro dilemma. Imagine walking through an ancient temple, the air heavy with incense and the faint echo of chanting in the distance. You pause in the center, sensing the weight of countless generations pondering the same question that now presses upon your mind. What is goodness? What makes an act moral, just, or right? The Greeks, with their gods and myths, framed this question in a particularly stark way. They asked, is something good because the gods command it, or do the gods command it because it is good? At first glance, the question seems simple. It's a riddle, a puzzle of logic and theology. Yet, the deeper you peer into it, the more tangled it becomes. If goodness exists purely because the gods command it, then morality becomes arbitrary. Picture it. One day, the gods decree that generosity is good. The next day, perhaps mischief is virtuous and cruelty is celebrated. The foundation of right and wrong would be a cosmic whim, shifting like clouds in the sky. Your sense of justice, your quiet conscience, your gut sense of what feels inherently right, all hang precariously on divine decree, entirely outside your understanding or control. The stability of moral law, the very idea that some things are justly condemned or praised, collapses into uncertainty. But the alternative is equally unsettling. Suppose the gods command what is good because it is good, then goodness exists independently of the divine. The gods are no longer the source of morality. They are merely observers, recognizing what is already inherently right. In this light, the gods become secondary, perhaps even irrelevant, in establishing ethical law. Morality has its own grounding, a standard beyond the reach of authority, sacred or secular. But what is that standard? Where does it reside, if not in some commanding power, if not in the divine mind? We are left to wander the vast terrain of human reason, intuition, and experience, searching for something that might anchor goodness. This is the loop of the Euthyphro dilemma, named after Plato's dialogue in which Socrates questions Euthyphro, a man prosecuting his own father for murder. Socrates asks, is what you are doing pious because the gods love it, Or do the gods love it because it is pious? Euthyphro fumbles. The simplicity of the question masks its depth. Socrates' inquiry is not about theology alone, but about the very structure of morality. Can it ever be grounded in authority? Or does it float in the ether, eternal yet intangible, like a shadow you can never quite grasp? Think about this in human terms. Suppose a government passes a law declaring lying to be morally virtuous. If morality is entirely a matter of command, obedience is the only measure of goodness. But your own inner compass might resist. You know intuitively that some lies harm, some betray trust, some erode bonds between people. Does the law make them right, or are you right in feeling they are wrong? The tension mirrors the Euthyphro dilemma. Do external commands define right and wrong, or is there a standard of good that stands independent of authority? Many philosophers have wrestled with this. Thomas Aquinas argued that morality is grounded in the nature of God, who is the ultimate good, making the two inseparable. Modern thinkers like Immanuel Kant suggested that morality can be discerned through reason, through the universal principles that govern rational agents. But even then, a loop emerges. If morality is discovered through reason, how can we be certain that our reasoning aligns with the true nature of good? Is it possible that our intuitions, our logic, are flawed or incomplete, leaving us in a state of moral uncertainty? The dilemma also resonates beyond abstract philosophy into the lived experience of ethical decision-making. Consider acts of heroism. When a firefighter runs into a burning building, we call it brave and right. Is it right because society commands us to see bravery as good, because rules or religion dictate valor? Or is it inherently good, recognized across cultures and eras, irrespective of law or divine decree? When we answer, we are engaging with the same tension the Greeks pondered. Is there an inherent structure to morality, or is all goodness ultimately conditional? And here lies the unsettling beauty of the loop. The Euthyphro dilemma circles endlessly. If morality comes from authority, we are dependent, caught in obedience, never certain whether the next command might shift the scale. If morality exists independently, we are left floating, seeking grounding in a reality that might not yield a final answer. Either way, the question is never fully resolved. It is a spiral that pulls us in, asking us to examine the very essence of judgment, of conscience, of the principles we rely upon to navigate our lives. Even in modern society, the dilemma echoes subtly. Legal systems attempt to codify morality, but they are often reactive, not prescriptive. They reflect cultural norms, sometimes outdated, sometimes evolving, always imperfect. Ethical theories, from utilitarianism to virtue ethics, seek to provide clarity, yet each rests on assumptions about human nature, about the consequences of actions, or the cultivation of character. None escape the gravitational pull of the original question. Where does goodness truly reside? Is it dictated externally or discovered internally? Some find comfort in the idea of divine grounding, that morality is anchored in a higher, infallible authority. Others find solace in reason, in the belief that humans can navigate the moral landscape with intellect and empathy. But both positions carry tension. Authority can be fallible or capricious. Reason can be limited or subjective. The loop persists, a subtle hum at the edge of thought, whispering that certainty may be unreachable. Yet perhaps the power of the Euthyphro dilemma is not in resolution but in reflection. It forces us to confront the roots of our ethical intuition, to question why we act and why we judge. It invites humility, acknowledging that morality might not be absolute in the way we imagine, that it might be a dialogue between authority and understanding, between the external and the internal. It is a mirror held to the mind, reflecting the tension between obedience and insight, between what is commanded and what is inherently recognized. And there is a strange comfort in this endless loop. Just as a calm river may circle a rock, creating eddies that never settle but always move, so too does the contemplation of the Euthyphro dilemma allow us to float within thought without needing to anchor absolutely. We can trace the loop, observe its contours, and recognize the subtle truths it reveals. That the question of morality is not merely academic, but woven into every choice, every act of judgment, every quiet reflection on right and wrong. Finally, We notice a rhythm in this contemplation, a cadence that mirrors the larger patterns of existence. The Euthyphro dilemma is not isolated. It connects to every philosophical loop we have considered, from the Ship of Theseus, questioning identity, to the Bootstrap paradox, questioning origins, to the void, questioning nothingness. Morality, like time, identity, and existence, becomes a mirror reflecting itself endlessly. As we pause at the edge of this segment, the question lingers in the air. If goodness exists, where does it dwell? If authority commands, how firm is its hold? And if we search for morality beyond the gods, beyond laws, beyond tradition, can we ever be certain we have found it? Perhaps certainty is not the point. Perhaps the value lies in the spiral itself, in the careful, deliberate movement through thought, the gentle turning of ideas in the mind, letting the mystery resonate without forcing an answer. From morality, we spiral outward to the grandest loop of all, existence itself. The question shifts from what is good to why there is anything at all. Why does the universe exist? Why is there being rather than nothing? If morality loops in contemplation of goodness, existence loops in contemplation of reality itself, inviting us into the quiet wonder of being, the calm terror of the infinite, and the reflective stillness of a question that may never be answered. The first cause, as we reach the final segment of our journey through loops of logic and existence, we arrive at perhaps the most profound and unsettling question of all. Why is there anything at all? Every event we witness seems to have a cause. The tree falls because the wind blows. The candle extinguishes because the air stirs. The river flows because gravity pulls. Even our thoughts seem chained in this way. One idea leads to another, each triggered by countless prior moments. Cause follows effect, and effect follows cause, in a chain that stretches through time. But as we trace this chain backward, inevitably, we come to a troubling question. What caused the first cause? If every event requires a cause, then there must have been a beginning somewhere. But what exists before that beginning? What set the chain in motion? It's a question that has haunted philosophers, scientists, and poets for millennia. A question that loops endlessly in the mind like a quiet echo in a vast, empty hall. One answer offered is the notion of an uncaused cause, something outside the chain, beyond time, beyond space, beyond the rules we rely upon to understand reality. Some call it God. Some call it the universe itself. Some simply call it mystery. The uncaused cause is unique. It exists without explanation, necessary and eternal, the foundation upon which all other events rest. It is the quiet origin, untouched by the constraints of causality. It breaks the rules, and yet by breaking them, it allows all rules to exist at all. Imagine this uncaused cause as a calm, infinite lake, perfectly still before the first stone falls. Nothing stirs the surface, yet the potential for ripples exists, and from the moment a stone touches the water, waves radiate outward, touching every shore. The lake itself did not need a cause, it simply is, and from its stillness, everything else unfolds. Yet this answer leaves some unsettled. If we rely on a first cause, we introduce something absolute, something outside the natural order. And absolute things are hard to grasp. They are difficult to reconcile with our understanding of the universe, which is built on chains of cause and effect. If we call it God, we ask further, why this God and not another? If we call it the universe itself, we ask, why does the universe exist rather than nothing? Even the uncaused cause, meant to resolve the infinite regress, sparks new questions. The alternative is the infinite regress, a chain of causes with no beginning, stretching back endlessly, forever circling in a loop. In this view, there is no first cause, no ultimate origin. Every cause is preceded by another, and the chain continues without end. Time may be eternal, the universe eternal, and causality itself may not require a starting point. There is no final answer, only the quiet, infinite spiral of causes linking to effects, looping without cessation. Picture this infinite regress as a vast corridor of mirrors, stretching into darkness in both directions. Each reflection contains another reflection, ad infinitum. You see yourself stepping forward, but each step is already preceded by countless others, and the corridor extends endlessly behind you. There is movement, there is progression, and yet there is no absolute beginning. You are caught in the infinite spiral, observing its beauty and feeling a subtle vertigo from its endlessness. Both visions, the uncaused cause and the infinite regress, leave us unsettled, each in its own way. One offers a calm, absolute foundation, yet challenges our understanding of the natural order. The other offers endless continuity, yet denies a beginning, leaving us in perpetual contemplation. Neither resolves the question fully. Instead, they invite us to pause, to linger in thought, and to observe the subtle patterns of reality without necessarily demanding closure. And here, perhaps, we notice a curious symmetry. The first cause mirrors every loop we have explored in this series. Logic itself can trap us in self-reference. Time can loop through paradoxes. Identity shifts like the planks of the Ship of Theseus. And even nothingness folds into something by the mere act of thought. Morality loops between authority and inherent good. Existence questions itself endlessly. And now, causality loops in its turn, either spiraling infinitely backward or resting upon a first cause that defies explanation. We begin to sense the shape of the universe in these contemplations. Circular, spiraling, recursive. Each question folds into another. Each answer opens new doors. And perhaps this is the quiet lesson of all the loops we have explored. Certainty is rare. The mind seeks beginnings, endings, and clear boundaries, yet the reality of thought, logic, and existence resists such closure. Instead, there is awe, a gentle vertigo, and a recognition of something far larger than our attempts to comprehend. As we drift toward the end of this journey, we can allow ourselves to embrace the loops, the spirals, and the spiraling questions. They do not need to be solved. They do not demand finality. In fact, their power may lie in their endlessness, in the gentle rhythm of cause following effect, thought following thought, question following question. In this, there is a strange comfort. We are part of the unfolding, part of the spiral, observers of a universe that is at once mysterious and beautiful. And now, as night settles gently around you, imagine the first cause not as a question to be answered, but as a soft, eternal presence. Imagine the infinite regress as a river of gentle thought, flowing endlessly through the mind, carrying every question, every paradox, and every quiet revelation downstream into calm waters. Feel the tension of unresolved mysteries ease as your mind floats along the currents of contemplation. There is no need to chase answers tonight. The loops can exist peacefully alongside your awareness, like stars circling in the sky, each glowing with its own quiet light, each part of a vast, interconnected cosmos. Logic, time, identity, nothingness, morality, and existence itself all spiral together, forming patterns too intricate to fully perceive, yet deeply satisfying to observe. You can rest in this recognition, knowing that to wonder is itself a form of understanding. So, as you lie down, feel the spirals of thought slowly unwind, gently easing your mind. Imagine the loops softly folding inward, like waves lapping at the shore of consciousness, until only calm remains. Allow your awareness to float in this quiet space, suspended between question and reflection, between curiosity and peace. Good night. Let the first cause rest as a gentle presence in the background of your mind, and let the infinite regress flow like a quiet river, carrying away tension, doubt, and the need for certainty. Rest now in the knowledge that it is enough to ponder, enough to marvel, enough to drift into sleep surrounded by the mysteries of existence. May your dreams spiral gently through the loops of thought we have traced, exploring their beauty without urgency, discovering their calm without striving. Sleep with the quiet awe of the universe around you, the uncaused cause beneath it all, and the infinite regress above it, all folding into a peaceful night. Good night, and may the loops carry you softly into the gentle arms of sleep.